Okay, so first of all, I want to align all of these charts in a grid. And the first thing I'll need to do is to get the Developer tab. So right click on the top and customize the ribbon. Then tick the Developer tab and OK. Then go to the Developer tab and open up Visual Basic. Click on the name of the workbook that you're currently in, then go to Insert and insert a module. And this is where we will be typing. So type sub align charts, open and close brackets, and enter. Then the next step is to define all of the variables that we'll use. So we will define SHP as a shape, and charts are a type of shape, so these will be all of our charts. Then we will define Cnt as long, and I'm using Cnt to stand for count, and we will be using this to count all of the charts that we have. And long is just a type of number, but it can only be whole numbers because we're counting the number of charts we have, and you can't have half a chart. Then the next set of variables are for the location of the charts. So we will define dTop as double, dLeft as double, dHeight as double, and dWidth as double. Now if I use this chart here as an example, the top is this edge here and the left is this edge here. So if we know the top and the left, we can work out the location of this top left hand corner here. Then the height is the size of the chart from top to bottom. So if we have the top and we add the height of the chart onto that, we can work out where the bottom is. And then the width is the size of the chart from side to side. So if we know what the left hand side is, we can then add the width of the chart onto this and work out where the right hand side is. So if we have the top left hand point here, we can add on the width of the chart and the height of the chart to work out where the bottom right hand corner is. So we can use these four variables, the top, the left, the height and the width, to work out the exact location of the chart. And then there is just one more variable we need to define, and that is going to be start as double, and start is going to be the start location, and double here is another kind of number, but this time it doesn't have to be whole numbers, they can have decimal places. Now the next step is to define a constant value, and this will be ColCnt as long, and I will make this equal to 2. And this is going to be the number of columns we want in our grid. Then I need to make count equal to 1 to start off with, and then I'll type a for loop. So for each SHP, so for each shape in Selection.ShapeRange. And this line here means take every shape or every chart in the selection. And that means that you need to have the charts you want to arrange selected before you run this macro. So with every chart in this selection, I am going to do an if test to it. So if the count is equal to 1, so if I have the first chart selected, I don't actually want to do anything to this chart. I'm going to leave it exactly where it is and then move all of the other charts around it. But I do want to use this to define some variables. So I will take the first chart and make the left-hand side of the first chart my start location. Then if the count is not equal to 1, I want to do another test and I want to move the chart. I'll just skip this for the moment, and then at the bottom here I need to end the if statement. And then down here I will define some more variables. So I'll make dTop equals to dot_top, then dLeft equal to dot_left, then dHeight equal to dot_height, and dWidth equals to dWidth. So here I'm taking all of the variables that I created at the top and actually assigning values to them. So the dot_top, etc. are all of the locations for the very first chart that I have selected. So dTop is now, for example, this point here, and dLeft is this edge here. Now, at the moment, I have the first shape selected because I'm doing something with this chart, but I need to deselect it to be able to move to the next step. So that's going to be end with. Then down here, I'm going to take the count and make it equal to count plus 1. This will mean that every time we go round the for loop, the count will increase by 1. And here I need to say next shape to make sure we then go back round to the beginning of the for loop again. So the first thing it's going to do is select the first shape, and because the count will be equal to 1 in this case, it's not going to do anything, but will define all of the variables. So it will define the start location and also the top position, the left, the height and the width of the first chart. Then we'll go down here and we'll add 1 to the count, so the count will become 2. And then we'll loop back up to the beginning of the for loop again, and this time we'll have the second chart selected. So this time the count is not equal to 1, it's equal to 2, which then brings us to this else statement here. So this time we actually want to move the chart to the side, and I'm going to do this by taking dot_top and making it equal to dTop, and dTop we assigned previously to be the top edge of the first chart, and this dot_top here is the top edge of the second chart. So we're making the top edge of the second chart the same as the top edge of the first chart, so they will then both line up. And then we also need to make them line up side by side. So I'll take dLeft, which will be the left-hand edge of the second chart, and make it equal to dLeft, which is going to be the left-hand side of the first chart. But I don't want exactly this, because then that will make the second chart exactly over the top of the first chart in the exact same place. So what I actually want to do is add dWidth to this. So that means we'll take the left-hand edge of the first chart, then add the width to it, and that will become the location of the left-hand side of the second chart. So they will be lined up side by side. Now let's save this and have a look at what it's actually doing. I can't save this in a normal Excel spreadsheet. I need to save it in a macro-enabled spreadsheet. So we'll go to File and Save As, and change this here to a macro-enabled workbook and save. And now it's a macro-enabled workbook. I can run macros on it. So I need to have the charts I want to arrange selected before I run the macro. So select the first chart, then press Ctrl A to select all of the other charts. Then go to macros, and you can see AlignCharts here is the macro that we just created, and then run this. And now you'll see that the charts have been repositioned, so they are all lined up side by side. If I reposition a couple of these charts, I'll then run the macro again and we'll have a look at what it's doing step by step. So I will select these charts here, and this time I'll select the first one, then hold down Control to select the other two, then go back to the macro and press F8, and this will allow us to go through the macro line by line. So the first thing it does is define all of the variables, and the count starts at 1. Then we go into the for loop and we have the first shape selected and the count is equal to 1. So it doesn't do anything in the first step, it just defines the variables. The start location becomes the left-hand side of the first chart here. Then we have the top of this first chart, the left-hand side again, the height of this chart, and then the width of this chart. Then we add 1 to the count, so it becomes 2, and then we loop back round to the top of the for loop, and we are now on the second chart. So this time count is not equal to 1, it is 2, so we go to the else part of this test. And we are going to take the top of the second chart here and make it equal to the top of the first chart here. So this chart is about to move upwards. You can see that there. Now we're going to take the left-hand edge of the first chart, add the width of this chart onto it, and then make the left-hand edge of the second chart equal to this location. So the second chart is about to move to the right. Then I will move over so we can see the next step. And we are now redefining all of these variables again, and this time they're going to be the location of the second chart. Then we'll add 1 to the count, so the count becomes 3, then loop back round to the beginning of the for loop, and this time the count is equal to 3. It's not equal to 1, so we go to the else part of the statement again, and we are now making the top of this chart here equal to the top of the second chart here. So it's about to move upwards. Then we take the left-hand side of this chart here, add the width of this chart onto it, and then move this chart along to line up with it. And you can see that there. Now I only selected 3 charts this time, so we will now exit the for loop and then end the macro. But if I selected more charts, it would keep looping through. And you can see that's what it did previously with all of the charts lined up side by side. But this isn't exactly what I want. What I want is for them to be in a grid. So this chart goes down here, and then this one is next to it, and the other two end up down the bottom. So what I need is some kind of test to figure out if I should move the chart to the side or I should move it down. And this test I'm going to use the mod formula for. So let's say I have 6 charts, and the mod formula will divide one number by another number and then tell you how much is remaining. So if I take 1 here and I divide it by 2, you can't divide 1 by 2 because it is too small, so you end up with 1 left over. But we've already decided we're not going to be moving the first chart, so the first line doesn't count anyway. Then you can divide 2 by 2 exactly with nothing left over, so we get 0 here. Then for 3, 2 can go into 3 once with 1 left over, so we get 1 here. Then 4 can be divided by 2 twice with nothing left over, so we get 0. Then 2 can go into 5 twice with 1 left over, so we get 1. And 6 can be divided by 2 3 times with nothing left over, so we get 0. So you can see for the third chart here, this will be equal to 1, and we want to move it downwards, and that will also be the case for the fifth chart. So we can use this as a test to decide whether we want to move the chart to the side or if we want to move it downwards. In order to do this, we have to add another if test into this. So if the count mod ColCnt is equal to 1, then I'm going to move the chart downwards, and the column count is the constant that I assigned up here to be equal to 2. And to move the chart downwards, I need to do dTop is equal to dTop, but this will make them line up. What I actually want is dTop plus dHeight. So that takes the top of the chart, adds the height of the chart onto it, and then makes that the location of the top edge of the next chart. Then I also need to line them up side by side, and to do this I need dLeft, but I can't make this equal to dLeft because that will be this left-hand edge here, as dLeft gets updated every single time we go round the for loop. And what I actually want this chart to be lined up with is the left-hand edge of the first chart here. So I defined this as a separate variable, and that is my start location up here. So instead of dLeft, it's going to be equal to start instead. Then if the mod isn't equal to 1, I want it to move sideways, which is what I was doing previously. And because I now have two if tests in here, I need another end if. Now we've made that change, I'm going to save this and we'll run the macro again. And I will reposition these charts so we can see the movement more clearly. Now here I'll select this, then hold down Control and select the other two as well and press F8 so we can step through this line by line. So we define all of the variables and the count is equal to 1. Then we go into the for loop and the first chart is equal to 1, so we don't move it, but we do define all of these variables. Then we add 1 to the count, so the count is now 2, and we are now on the second chart, so the count is not equal to 1, which brings us to this test here, but 2 can be divided by 2 with nothing left over, so this is not equal to 1, which takes us to this part of the else statement. And so we do the same thing we did before. We make the top edge of this equal to the top edge of this. Then we make the left-hand side of this edge equal to the right-hand side of the previous chart. Then we redefine all of these variables to be the position of the second chart, and we loop through again, and the count now becomes 3, and we are now on the third chart, and this time the count is still not equal to 1, but the modulus of the count is now equal to 1 because the count is 3 and 2 can go into 3 once with 1 left over. So this time we're going to move the chart down. So we're going to take the top edge of this chart here, then add the height of that chart, and that becomes the location of the top edge of this chart. Then we take the left-hand side of the first chart, which is this here, and we make it equal to the left-hand side of the third chart here. So this chart is now going to move sideways. And you can see that there. And if we had more charts, it would keep looping round. But as I only selected 3, that's the end of the macro. If I close this, I'll select the first chart again and then press Ctrl A to select everything and go to macros and run the macro. So now you see I have all of the charts lined up. So for the first chart, we don't move it at all. Then for the second chart, because 2 can be divided by 2 with nothing left over, which is what we did here, this moves to the side. Then the third chart, instead of being put over here, moves downwards because 2 could go into 3 once with 1 left over, so the mod is equal to 1. Then the fourth chart moves to the side again, relative to the position of the previous chart. Then the fifth chart, instead of being moved to the side here, gets moved downwards because 2 can go into 5 twice with 1 left over. And then for the sixth chart, that also gets moved to the side. Now we can change this to be equal to a different number if we want a different number of columns in our chart. So I will press Ctrl A again to select everything and then go to macros and run the macro again. And now I have 3 columns, column 1, column 2 and column 3. So what this is doing is taking this number here and dividing it by 3 and then working out what the remainder is. So 1 can't be divided by 3 because it's too small. Also we just get 1 remaining, but we can ignore that anyway because we're not doing anything to the first chart. And then 2 is too small to be divided by 3, so we just get 2 back. And then 3 can be divided by 3 exactly with nothing left over, so we get 0. But because in our macro we're only testing to see if it's equal to 1 or not, the same thing happens if it's 2 or if it's 0. They both mean move the chart to the side. It's only if the value is equal to 1 that we move it downwards. So for example, 3 can go into 4 once with 1 left over, so this becomes equal to 1. So the fourth chart here, instead of being moved to the side over here, gets moved downwards. And then because we position all of our charts relative to the previous chart in the selection, that means the fifth one is then moved to the side of the fourth one, and then the sixth one is moved to the side of the fifth one. Because 3 can go into 5 once with 2 left over, and then 3 can go into 6 twice with nothing left over. And if you want to control the order that the charts are arranged in, this is actually the order you select them in. So you can reorder them just by selecting them in a different order and then running the macro again, and you can see they all move around. Now, I got this code from the Excel Campus website, and I have just simplified it a bit to make it easier to understand. So in this video, I have shown you how to arrange charts in a grid in Excel using VBA, and that is everything.